So I was a science student. We used to read about the Great Depression. We saw the 2008 crisis. But this was something we were never prepared for. Since it's a health crisis, the last thing on anybody's mind is financial reporting. Going concern is a fundamental assumption. That's the first thing we learn.
Yes.
When you look at accounting, this is the real test of the going concern. If I recall back, I don't think I was ever prepared to become a chartered accountant or what it takes. In fact, I joined the firm in '93 only, which was set up by my father. So it's been very difficult to actually fill up his shoes.
How true and fair is true and fair now?
A lot of companies will need to do a formal assessment of impairment. Because of this work from home, the number of security breaches has increased tremendously. Are you going to really be a big brother who's going to keep on seeing what they're doing? So for auditors, it's really going to be a big challenge. Consulting firms, I think it's a great opportunity. Technology. I think that is what's going to happen. Clients are going to be asking for reduction in fee. It may be the right time to revisit that yes, this is an extraordinary one. So I'm reminded of a lecture which Steve Jobs gave where he talked about connecting dots. All this is going to help you when you go up the ladder.
Our guest today is a chartered accountant. He's a specialist in financial reporting and auditing. He has served the Central Council of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. And wait, let me pick up the paper. He was the chairman of Financial Reporting Review Board of ICAI. He has been the vice chairman of Auditing and Assurance Standards Board. He has been the president of the Board of Governors of the Delhi chapter of the Institute of Internal Auditors, Florida. And he has been a technical advisor and so many things. Please welcome CA Sanjay Vasudeva from New Delhi, India. Hello, sir. How are you?
Very fine, Abhishek. Lovely.
It's nice to see you.
Same here, Abhishek. It's been a long time since we met physically.
Yes. Now I think everything is virtual these days, even the business. Yeah. And I must admit, this is one of the toughest intros I've ever done on the show. And it's such a heavy profile, sir. You've been a mentor to so many people and you're a role model. So please tell us about your journey.
You being very kind, Abhishek. Very liberal with words and praise. But it's my pleasure to be here. So it's been a fairly long journey now. I won't say uneventful. Yes, has had many twists and turns. So I was a science student. I don't know if you know that. I studied science in school. And then I chose to study economics. And sometime later, joined chartered accountancy, did my articles with Pricewaterhouse, and then I joined my father's firm. And at that time also, initially, I dabbled in a lot of other things, which was financial services, various other things, and then actually got back into practice. So 93 January, I qualified as a chartered accountant. And thereafter took me a year or so before I finally got down into audit and tax. And there also, when I joined the firm, I had started on tax. That was my subject. But then very soon I moved into audit. And then from stat audit, I went into internal audit, set up the internal audit practice, set up the outsourcing practice, and then again came back to stat audit. So it's been a fairly nice journey. If I recall back, I don't think I was ever prepared to become a chartered accountant or what it takes. But I see so many young people today who are very, very focused, and which sounds very good, really. So that's really been, and in fact, I joined the firm in '93 only, which was set up by my father, who's been a doyen in the profession. Mr. Vasudeva, 5 terms he served in the Central Council. He was chairman of Accounting Standard Board. and a much revered figure. So it's been very difficult to actually fill up his shoes, but I've really tried my best.
Oh, you're doing a fantastic job. Trust me. I mean, your achievements speak for themselves. And there was a change in the name of the firm, I think.
Yeah. So 2 years back, we merged with another very old firm. So we are a 40-year-old firm, SC Vasudeva and Company, and we merged with another firm, SP Puri and Company. And we combined our strengths in an effort to look at more opportunities, to integrate further, to get economies of scale, and to build up more practice areas. Yeah.
Right,
So
so
that's been good. So the name now is SCV and Company, and we changed to an LLP. We are now 13 partners. We are more than 200 people. And so that's been very good. It's been a great experience in getting two firms together, integrating the practices, integrating practice areas, getting people together. So I think it's a good thing, and to my mind, it's going to be the future of the profession. I think as we go along, as businesses become larger, complex, so practices also need to adapt. But there's a lot of give and take. I think it's not that easy. But there's a lot is required in terms of, because ultimately it's a people's business.
yes.
What we are in. So that's pretty much it. Yeah.
So you have a multi-state presence at the moment.
We do have our own office in Ludhiana, and we have other state offices also across the country. We work through other firms. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And also internationally, we are fairly connected with other firms also.
Yeah, it shows. And I heard that you had paid your esteemed visit to our Institute of Chartered Accountants body in Sydney as well.
Yeah. This was sometime back. I think more than 6-7 years back. I think. Yeah. And I delivered a talk also on in investing in India, property. In fact, investing in property. So we had a session at your chapter in Sydney. I often don't remember the year. I'm just trying to back of the mind, trying to recall, but I'm not able to. But yes, it was more than 6 years back. Yeah.
Perfect. So how are you finding the things changing? Because now due to coronavirus, the businesses have taken a hit, and the professionals are also feeling the heat. So how has the things changed? And I'll get back to the auditing and the financial reporting side of it as well. But how you personally finding it?
So it's something which we were never prepared for, Abhishek. I think nobody was prepared. We used to read about the Great Depression. We saw the 2008 crisis, but this was something we were never prepared for. So, it's like you just sitting at your home and seeing things unfolding. It's more like a celluloid version, which has now come to life. So businesses shutting down, supply chains disrupted, people held up everywhere, huge lockdowns, not only in our country, across the world, which is impacting businesses. So economies all over the world are impacted. It's not only India, Australia, China, US, across the world, economies have been impacted. So this is something which, if you look at it primarily, yes, it's a health issue. And more than the disease itself, I think there's a fear surrounding that. And with that fear, governments have had to react. Everybody has wanted to do their best in terms of containing the epidemic. So lockdowns have been announced at various stages. India also went in for lockdown. Some have planned it, some have unplanned. Because of unplanned, so everywhere there have been different problems. And the lockdown has resulted, as I mentioned to you, in huge dislocations. So the entire supply chain has been disrupted. So businesses have become impacted. Sales are down, commodity prices are down. So as accountants, our clients, all are impacted across the board. And there's a human element also. People are losing jobs, and you've you must have read about or seen the migrant crisis in India. Millions and millions of people going from one place to the other. So yes, these are some things which we are seeing, and it's not going to be away from the profession also. And since it's a health crisis, the last thing on anybody's mind is financial reporting.
Yeah.
Everybody is more. In fact, we had a session yesterday. We had a doctor in our firm. We had a doctor speaking to our team about getting back to work, what you need to do, what are the precautions to take. So those are things which I'm sure is more important. And across the world, governments have also responded. Whether it's Australia, US, across Europe, even Southeast Asia, Korea, Japan, China, people have responded by coming out with stimulus packages. Some have gone up to higher than 20% of GDP as US has done. So governments have responded. India has been late to respond. So there's not been a direct income transfer as much. But there's been a lot of concessions on some regulatory aspects and on getting bank finance, rolling over your working capital, rolling over your loans. So these are things which governments have done. Yeah.
Yes.
But ultimately, all this is going to impact financial reporting,
Yes.
and in turn, which is so.
And I think there's one aspect which cannot be quantified, that is the emotional and the psychological side of it, because you can't quantify that in numbers, and people are taking it to their minds. Their routines have been disrupted, and I think it's a hard time for everyone on the globe right now. So now coming back to the accounting and the financial reporting auditing side, what changes do you see that people or the accounting bodies have been working towards?
So let's group this into two main parts. One is the accounting and the other is the audit. And what we are seeing, so obviously, as I mentioned to you, disruption in business and supply chains and closure of factories is going to impact businesses. And how is that? Ultimately, that's going to impact financial reporting. So let's look at some of the major things which we are seeing, and which some of the accountancy bodies have also really flagged off. And they've provided guidance to members across the world. So a lot of this has been written and discussed. So I won't go into too much of technical detail, but just to get a sense of, yes, these are the things. So the big ticket items which in a balance sheet would definitely be impacted. And I'll come to one big ticket which is a standalone. But before that, let's look at others. So one definitely inventory. So inventory you are carrying as per the accounting principles, you've got to value it lower of cost or net realizable value. And the values definitely have fallen. You look at what is going to be the future. Look at what's happened in case of oil. So petroleum company, the larger of the largest companies, have had to write down on inventories. And similarly, commodity prices across the globe have fallen. Auto industry, again down. So all this has been challenging as far as inventory, looking at value, writing down of inventory, essentially. So this is one major item. So companies who are holding inventories, they might have bought it at a certain price,
Yes.
but because in future they will not be able to realize. And this is equally going to be applicable for finished goods and raw material. In fact, in one of our clients' case, we found that the fall in the raw material price was even much steeper than the finished goods. So these are things which one or companies will have to look at. Look at what is the right price at which you need to value the inventory. So that was one item. Second, on the non-current assets, which is fixed assets, could be intangible assets, goodwill. So because there needs to be, you need to look at what is your carrying value. And if your value is not is not going to get realized, or there's a fall in value in use, then you need to write down these assets. So there is an impairment which is
Impairment
required.
concept, yes.
And so the standard talks about indicators. So there need to be indicators which the company needs to look at before they carry out a formal assessment. So what we are going to look at is that a lot of companies will need to do a formal assessment of impairment, because all these indicators are there. Businesses are, as you know, factories are shut. There's disruption in supply chains, I mentioned earlier. All this is going to, there could be temporary ceasing of operation. There are layoffs, obsolescence. So all these are indicators. Again, economy not doing well. So both external, internal factors will lead to companies making formal estimate of impairment. They will need to see how they are going to recover this, the carrying value of the assets in the balance sheet. What we are also seeing, in fact, some results have come out. Companies have, we've not seen anybody really, I've not seen any, in fact, balance sheets where there's been an impairment loss. A lot of companies have done formal assessments and they evaluated, and they're hoping for businesses to restart. So they've factored that into looking at whether they really need to write down an impairment or not. So that's something which we are also seeing. Then another important aspect which we are seeing is on income taxes and government grants. So, like for instance, countries like Australia, US. Australia has these JobKeeper payments, where the government is going to pay you to pay the salaries. Similar in US. So a lot of other countries, whether it's across Europe, Ireland, I know for certain, Canada, US I've already mentioned. So many other countries are supporting businesses to support their employees and also to support the business. How do you account for that as government grant? Is it a government grant? How will you account for it? So that's going to be another area which is going to be material on the balance sheet. Maybe not in India, because businesses have not received direct assistance from government, but a lot of countries across the world, yes. Then on income taxes, like for India, had announced concessions fairly early as far as income taxes was concerned. There have been more concessions on taxes announced. Other countries, similar countries, have also announced tax cuts. Now, this needs to be reflected in balance sheets because you need to account for deferred tax, basically.
Yeah, so that's very insightful. And then you mentioned the inventories, and on the non-current assets, you refer to the impairment of assets. Is there any real threat to the going concern principle in accounting?
So that's the big ticket, Abhishek. That's the real big ticket. So going concern is a fundamental assumption. So that's the first thing we learn.
Yes.
When you look at accounting, and we have not come across a situation where actually we need to challenge that assumption now. Over so many years we've looked at accounting. This is the real test of the going concern. So companies, the first thing which businesses need to look at it is that how their liquidity is going to be, because liquidity and how you continue in the foreseeable future. Now there is definitely going to be an uncertainty, and you need to account for all this if there is a material uncertainty which casts a significant doubt on the going concern.
Yes.
The good part is that, as I mentioned earlier, the governments have supported a lot over businesses. So that support worldwide has helped companies perhaps tide over this crisis. But again, a formal estimate of going concern will again have to be made by managements. They'll have to see what are their cash flows in future. Like for instance, some companies, let's look at Virgin Atlantic in Australia is going to shut off. Yes. Is what I heard. So the going concern for them, financial statement preparers, the going concern assumption needs to be tested definitely, because it's not going to be a going concern. And for auditors again, I've heard of Thai Airways also shutting down. We had a report in India that about 40% of all restaurants could shut down. Today there was a news that 7 lakh small businesses or 700,000 businesses are going to shut down. So there is a real threat. There is a real threat. The financial statement preparers will need to look at whatever is going to be the state of the business, what is their supply chain, how is the demand impacted, what are going to be their future cash flows, is there a hope light at the end of the tunnel. So for instance, auto industry is down in the dumps, but they are seeing demand picking up sometime maybe a couple of months later, so they could factor that in. But as I mentioned to you, some like, let's say, hospitality, like hotels are shut, airline industries, this restaurants, recreation, media, entertainment, they're going to have a very, very tough time. So these are things which they'll need to have to factor in as far as going concern is concerned.
So Sanjay sir, what in your opinion is going to be the most significant, the impact on the accounting principles and the practices that people adopt from time to time?
So Abhishek, one of the things, so going concern was one. The other major impact is going to be expected credit loss. Expected credit loss again in the financial instrument. So before IFRS came in, you had an incurred loss model, and now you have an expected credit loss model, which means that I need to look at in future what is going to be my credit loss, and there are mathematical models, and on that basis I need to account for that loss. Now, because of all these changes, so my customers, let's say a company, their customers are going bankrupt, suppliers not supplying. So the entire aspect, there's going to be changes in interest rate. The credit profile of customers or people who can pay or not is going to change. There could be a delay. So that will have to be factored in. So you may have a higher provisioning on account of expected credit loss. And in case of banks and financial institutions, so India is, the banks are not on IFRS or Ind AS. So they will not be impacted, but the Reserve Bank of India, the regulator, already has certain provisions. But across the world, the expected credit loss provisioning should have a major impact on the banks and financial institutions, because they will need to estimate what is going to be a future loss. And very interestingly, Abhishek, this new provision came in the light of the 2008 crisis, when the Lehman Brothers crisis happened. So this expected credit loss, because that was when it was felt that things happened too quickly and there was no warning. So the expected credit loss is actually a way in which there's a warning that there's going to be a loss in future. So yes, to my mind, ECL and provisioning on that worldwide could be a major impact on balance sheet, especially banks and financial institutions. But again, one you'll also have to factor in if let's say the banking or financial institutions are getting support from the government, or is there going to be cash flows which are going to be supported, or there's going to be capital infusion. So to that extent, or the businesses whom they have lent out to, they are getting support, as we mentioned. So that could be a negating factor for the increase in provision. So companies will have to, and banks and financial institutions will have to, estimate that. So yes.
You already have the mathematical models in place as to value them and all
absolutely.
that.
Yes.
That's interesting. I mean, I've not seen many businesses or balance sheets incorporating such kind of, I've not come across personally. So Sanjay sir, how do you see now onto the other side? How do you see the audit provisions getting affected, and what are the key elements in that?
So Abhishek, so the accounting, whatever is done, obviously, and the overall business atmosphere is going to impact the audit. So as you are aware, today audit is all risk-based, and it is also based on understanding of the entity. And the risk, to my mind, to that extent is going to go up. So understanding the environment, one of the primary things which the auditor does is to understand the entity and the environment, and then to look at what are the risks which are going to impact the entity. So that is going to go up manifold, and the understanding about what is going to impact the business. So it could be a healthcare industry. You might feel that healthcare is not going to be impacted, but let's say because of COVID, businesses, the healthcare or the private healthcare has had to shut down their normal operations and move to COVID. So so there is a huge risk. So to that extent, estimation of risk and then my responding to those risks is going to be one of the major challenges as far as auditing is concerned. Then estimates, as we mentioned about this ECL.
Yes.
Similarly, you have estimates, obsolescence. I mentioned to you about impairment. I talked about inventory. All these are estimates. And if I'm going to write down, so how is this estimation done? Fair value estimation. This is again going to be a major aspect as far as audit is concerned. Going concern, management has looked at, but auditor again, whether they agree with the management or not. So there could be a fair amount of tussle between the managements, as maybe those charged with governance as well as the auditors are also concerned, to arrive at the conclusion. Because what the auditor needs to do is that they need to understand that whether the company is a going concern or not, and in certain circumstances where there is a material uncertainty, and which is casting significant doubt, they might still need to give a reporting in the audit report. So which means they will have to give a paragraph to balance out what the management is disclosing as far as the mitigating plans with regard to going concern. And in case disclosure is not adequate, they might even need to modify the report, which means qualifying the reports or even giving adverse opinion. So for auditors, it's really going to be a big challenge. Then where you have branches, subsidiaries across spread over, those getting across to those is also going to be, you may not be able to access. For instance, a lot of places are under lockdown. Some like in India, they are cordoned off because these are even in fact these are zones which red zones or containment zones, as they call them.
Yeah.
You can't visit. Like for instance, bank audits are going on, and I was told that there was one branch which was there in the premises of a hospital, which is one of the ones which is treating COVID patients. So the auditor, in fact, was concerned how they could do. So these are some of the challenges. Then you could, in case you're a parent auditor, there could be components spread across the globe. Anywhere could be countries which are still impacted under COVID. Those results may not be finalized in time. Those are some of the challenges. How you look at it? Inventory again.
Sorry, I cut you off. So like you said, I think one of the main challenges would be the physical verification of the assets.
And I was just going to come to that. Yeah. Because so inventory as the auditor's requirement, and this is an international standard 501, where the auditor needs to be present at the time of physical verification. Now, a country like India on 31st March, everything was closed, lockdown. So you could not, no auditor could actually travel and get the physical verification done. So there is a possibility that you can do the physical verification later. In fact, what our institute has also recommended now is that you could use technology. So which means you could have Zoom calls from your office to the client's place, ensure that the verification is being done from the Zoom call. For instance, now I'm interacting with you. You've got, you go through the factory premises or the warehouse, and you keep on.
I give you a virtual tour.
Look at, and I keep on pointing out that this, or I could use the services of other professionals who are located in that jurisdiction or city to conduct the verification. Those are things which we are also seeing, which is happening. And some of the larger firms are also using drones to carry out physical verification. So it's really interesting. And obviously, all this will be done post the financial year end in India, where we have 31st March year end closing. Maybe in Australia, since I think you have June, and in UK, I think they have April.
Right.
So they, if that lockdown is there again, they will do it later, and then they'll have to do a roll backward procedure to ensure all adjustments are made for the inventory. So these are some of the things which are peculiar. But again, more use of technology and going around looking at alternative procedures. Yeah.
So you see these new technologies that have been, they have been used these days. Do you see them being a norm, or like a blessing in disguise now that you figured out one another way of conducting the audits? Do you see it being like a big impact in the future procedures as well?
Oh, 100%. 100%. More and more technology. So, for instance, look at it this way. Now we are, and a lot of large public sector bank audits are being conducted as I speak now. And nobody would have thought that the larger of the larger banks, one would be able to do audit offline. Now, how has that been possible? It's been possible only through technology. So you are connected either through a virtual private network where you are able to access data. You are able to download that data. When you are accessing all this, obviously there are various security features also which need to be built in. And then you access data, you will analyze that data. So all this has been possible through technology. So this is going to definitely, I think, be the new normal. And we'll discuss about this more as I talk to you about what the firms need to do, or what's going to happen. I think, yeah. But yes, technology is good, but at the same time, right use of technology, understanding the risks and the security concerns, and the basis of opinion on that technology understanding is also important. So I don't need to over rely. Obviously, I'm going to rely on it, but I need to know to what extent I can rely.
True.
And how I'm going to use technology. But it's going to improve efficiency both from the preparer side as well as from the auditor side.
Auditor side as well. True. Yeah. So what I'm seeing is that there's a whole new technique of evidence collection. So how true and fair is true and fair now? Do you think that true and fair definition has been affected by this as well?
So Abhishek, as far as true and fair is concerned, very interesting as you mentioned that. And we were used to looking at, in fact, we had this discussion very recently, and we were used to looking at physical evidence. We're looking at files, we're looking at documents. And so that's the aspect about truth, that, okay, the evidence which you receive. But at the same time, you really, at times, you are surprised that what you feel is real may not be real. Yeah. So similarly, in case of technology, if you get something which is scanned and you get it from a reliable source, maybe it could be even more reliable than what you see in front of you. But again, it's a question of perception and understanding. And tomorrow, again, what's going to happen is, as today you have people who are going to look at documents and see if there's any forgery or if there's any fraudulent. So similarly, you'll need to look at data which you get, analyze patterns, see the authenticity of who has sent it, look at that data on screen, and somebody will be able to tell you that, okay, is this authentic or not? But so that's the true part. The fairness part is perhaps more on the what I'm going to present, how it is going to look in terms of, and there as is going to be a huge change, because the number of disclosures, the number of assumptions which are now going to come in, even in fact auditor reporting, there is a new requirement for key audit matters. The auditor needs to report on various processes, the way the audit was done, what were the challenges they faced, how they overcome that, what were the risk areas. This is going to form part of that report. On the fairness part, the disclosures, in fact, most regulators, especially the security regulators, would be prescribing newer disclosures into how companies have dealt with COVID-19, how they hope to deal with it in future. All these will come into play as far as disclosure of financial statements are concerned, and that is going to add to the fairness of the financial statement.
And then there's always that inherent risk of the system in itself, like how the
Yeah,
security breaches and
absolutely. So
access
we are,
controls.
in fact, what we are seeing is that because of this work from home, the number of security breaches has increased tremendously.
Oh.
And so companies need to, whosoever are working and working offline, they need to factor in all this to ensure that those security considerations have been dealt with. So one of the aspects which the auditor needs to look at is the systems, the IT systems. And this again becomes, as I mentioned to you, as far as risk assessment is concerned, this would form an important part of evaluating that risk component.
So Chandra sir, how do you see the firms getting adapted to this change? Like what steps primarily will they have to take for this?
So what, Abhishek, we could look at it in 2-3 parts. One, let's look at the from the service line perspective. Okay, so and let's look at a more positive note in terms of what could be the opportunity. So let's say if you're a firm which is doing audit, right? So you are going to need to adapt more towards technology, because as companies move more towards work from home, there's going to be more off-site work which needs to be done. So you will need to build in all those processes and checks, because so more technology, more use of tools, better assessment of risk, going concern aspects, impairment. So all those skill sets will need to be done, and I think there's going to be a greater regulatory oversight also. But at the same time, there's going to be greater opportunity as far as this area is also concerned. So maximum use of IT, maximum understanding of that, understanding businesses, and understanding and identifying risk is going to be a key. That is going to be one. So if you're a tax firm now, or you specialize in tax, then what you need to be prepared for is clients looking at you for restructuring advice. There could be purchase, sale, family settlements, combining businesses, whatever. What could be the tax impacts? There are various tax incentives which governments have given. What's the right way to avail them? Whether businesses are availing them or not, that's something which one needs to be prepared with. Consulting firms, I think it's a great opportunity, because there could be opportunities on cost reduction, better efficiency, looking at internal controls, working from home, IT, all these aspects. There is greater risk, there is segregation of duties. So the normal processes will not be in operation. So one will need to perhaps do up better SOPs, look at, come up with what could be the risk at those stages, rewrite SOPs also, advise on how one needs to look at those risks, and as also on the cybersecurity as we discussed. If greater opportunities for perhaps offshore outsourcing, corporate finance, again, as I mentioned, restructuring, and there could be more opportunities for purchase, sale of businesses, which again leads to more requirements of valuation due diligence. It's going to happen as we go along. So that is as far as the business side is concerned, and where the firms need to be prepared. The firms also need to be, on the commercial side, firms need to be prepared that clients are going to be asking for reduction in fee, because their businesses are going to go down, their revenues are going to go down. So they're going to be expecting you to also. So I think that's something which firms need to understand, recognize, and that conversation has to happen with clients. Then the firms also need to see how they can look at their costs. Are there fixed costs? Are there rentals which are, or their premises which you don't need? So, and which is now people are going to think about that. Again, I'm going to say work from home, because that's the mantra today. But yes, that's going to be there for some time. And there are various studies which are saying that at least 25 to 30%, or even maybe higher. In fact, some IT companies have done about more than 75 to 80% of work from home. So accounting firms also, which may have larger presence, larger personnel, may need to factor that into how they can control costs. So if you are going to maybe spend less on your let's say on your premises, you will need to spend more on IT controls and tools, because if things are going to be done, so there's going to be a balance. This is a balance which they will need to really look at as far as operation. Then the other thing which businesses are doing, and then firms will also need to do is, if they're going to reduce costs, employee costs, salaries, are you going to cut salaries? Are you going to defer them? How do you communicate this to your staff? For larger firms, I think this is going to be a challenge. You're going to cut bonuses. There, for instance, I heard recently that there were some companies in different industries which cut costs drastically.
Yeah.
Now it did not. Obviously, it doesn't. No cutting of salaries goes on. So it's how you are going to communicate that to your team. So these are some things which firms need to adapt on the operation side. Then fundamentally, as far as you need to prepare for the future, technology. I think that is what's going to happen. Work from home is a norm. You're going to have to use better. So firms like ours, we may not be really up there as far as technology, but yes, we invested a certain part. So during the lockdown, we were pretty much working as it is from home. We also didn't realize, because all our people had we were connected to servers and all, and we were able to conduct the audit. So I'm not saying that the pandemic is going to continue, but businesses are going to adjust. Businesses are going to automate processes. So as advisors, consultants, auditors, we also need to adjust. We also need to change ourselves in that manner. So technology is going to be really one. Again, ability to manage. So if you're cutting costs and you are also going to have people working away from home, then the ability to manage remote teams is going to be a key challenge, because you're not going to have everybody there. So offline, how do you monitor who's where? Are they doing work properly? Are you going to really be a big brother who's going to keep on seeing what they're doing, or are you going to look at WhatsApp? How do you ensure team building happens offline? How do you ensure people are on board? How do you ensure efficiency? How do you ensure timely completion of engagements? How do you ensure that clients and your teams are connecting well? These are some of people issues which also I foresee, which is going to happen as we move along. So firms will really need to adapt. But again, the bottom line is technology, data analytics, more use of data analytics, better use of security tools, better use of access controls, analyzing clients' data, those aspects. And whether you are in consulting, so let's see, even tax and everything, more and more technology. How are you going to access? You may be reading judgments, physical copies, but now you'll get an e-link. So looking at that, understanding that, I know, very interesting. My father, at the age of post 80, he is now on his laptop only at home. He doesn't move out. So he's now, in fact, he recently did a course on international tax. I mean, amazing.
Oh, that's great.
Did a webinar, yeah. So it's not the younger people. I think older people are also adapting, making the best of it. So these are some instances how I see things will change. Yeah, there's a lot more which is going to happen, but I suppose these are some of the key things which motivating employees, taking care of their health. There could be, as you mentioned, psychological issues,
the behavioral
the fear
side.
of the pandemic, tomorrow, risks of losing jobs, productivity could be impacted. So these are, again, as businesses, accounting firms also, we will need to look. And somewhere, I think the way of doing businesses are also going to change. So could impact some practices. The smaller, medium practitioners will also need to upgrade. I mean, that's always going to be there. but again, more technology. And one thing which I feel is very important is to be in close connect with the client, really understand what are the challenges which they are facing, and how, as an advisor, if you're not an auditor, maybe that conflict, but as an advisor, as a tax person, also you can advise. There also be more. We are seeing things on succession planning, wills, because even younger people today, because of the pandemic, fear that they now need to have wills in place. Where do they invest? Advising them on the proper way for investing. What's secure? Is it debt fund, equity? If equity market is not okay, then what is the safety like? So these are some of the things. Whether you look at opportunities, you look at risks, you look at the way of doing business, where I think firms will need to adapt and change.
Yeah, I think that's a massive change in every aspect of, I think, business, your behavior, the human side, the psychological side. I remember we term it, we term, when we audit, we term them as extraordinary events and items. Do you think this extraordinary was a little bit more extraordinary this time?
So Abhishek, very, very good question. And you'll be surprised that when all of us started studying accounting, there used to be an item called extraordinary item. And extraordinary item was something which was out of the ordinary. And the example which was given was an earthquake, flood, things like that. Now, when IFRS came in, extraordinary item has gone out. So everything is now ordinary. And the standard setters felt that there was nothing which was extraordinary to that extent. So anything is going to impact the business. But this pandemic perhaps shows that it may be the right time to revisit that, yes, this is an extraordinary event. And in fact, a lot of discussions are being held that can this be taken to be an extraordinary event? So maybe, things like going concern, impairment, everything could be parked in that extraordinary event, case. And then you don't need to make, don't need to look at these financial statements on that basis without parking it separately. So yes, this, to just answer your question, this is an extraordinary event, but till the accounting changes, we will have to put this as an ordinary event only, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's strange. Yeah, so Sanjay sir, I was looking at your brief resume, which by no means is brief, let me tell you that. And like I told you, this was one of the longest introductions in my show, and I think your introduction deserves an episode of its own. So out of all these, you've been a member, you've held this position, that position. Which one's your favorite and why?
Oh, difficult question. I've enjoyed everything which I've done, whether it's working with the firm or the Institute of Internal Auditors. But particularly, Abhishek, my stint as a technical advisor on the International Auditing Assurance Board is something which really stands out. And that was because I was part of the council of the Institute and I was nominated. But the learning was tremendous. The atmosphere, this being on the board, seeing the way the board used to function, the thought process behind that, I think that was really amazing. The teamwork, the structured way in which thoughts. I mean, today you read a standard, you don't know what's really coming behind that. Here you understand what is coming behind. What are the different views across the globe? Who is thinking what? And sitting across on the table, trying to make sense of that, putting it down into language, each comma, full stop, and the discipline with which work is done, the punctuality with which things happen, the whole planning which goes into. I think that was a great learning experience for me. I mean, I wish we could really learn that in our country. It will really help us as far as looking at projects, conducting meetings, getting results out of meetings, and getting teams together. I think our chairman also a phenomenally gifted person, not only technically, but how to conduct a meeting, how to balance out different views, how to actually move ahead. I think great learning. Superlative, absolutely.
What was the
totally blessed to be part.
What was the experience around it? Like, what was the core thing that you had to do there?
So we were formulating standards, and I was assisting a member on the board who's also an Indian. In fact, this is the first time it happened that we had a member from India and a technical advisor from India. So we had to look at whatever the formulation of auditing standards, international auditing standards, and how looking at those drafts, giving your comments, looking at jurisdiction issues, inputs being given on drafts, on content, discussions. We had groups in India which were looking at those documents. We used to have meetings. We used to go there. We had to study those. We had to, then give our comments, learning from everybody, what people, what views they had. So those were the standards which you see, let's say, on accounting estimates and all, on risk assessment, as I mentioned, the new ones which are coming, even on components, the one on group audit, all were there being discussed in detail. So that was a great.
So you were one of the main men behind that.
I wasn't one man. I was just one of the people, and I was only a technical advisor. I was not a member, but yes, it was a great opportunity to learn.
Sure, sounds like it.
Work. So I was doing behind the scenes, but yes, it was great.
Beautiful. So Sanjay, so this gets me to the final section of the talks. I call it "Been There, Done That" section. You've been outstanding in your profession. You've mentored more than 1,000 articles, I've heard. And you're a big name. If you had to give one advice to the professionals or the students out of all your experiences, what would that be?
Oh, thank you, Abhishek. So definitely, I'd like to go to, and this is something which I've been talking to a lot of students and earlier also. So I'm reminded of a lecture which Steve Jobs gave at, I think, a Stanford event, graduating event, where he talked about connecting dots. And he talked about the fact that when in his early life, whatever he did, he didn't know what impact that was going to have later on. So you are aware about, everybody knows about Steve Jobs, that he never had, he never went to college. I mean, he dropped out of college, but he was, he liked to do things very well. So, he was, calligraphy was his passion. Yeah. And when he designed computers, this calligraphy helped him at that time to do something which was really, really amazing, out of the world. So my learning from that, and which is what I tell people, is that one, obviously you've got to work hard. And at times you don't know what is going to result in the future. I mean, your inventory verification, somebody says, no, but what you do at that time, maybe a mundane task, maybe even looking at total, maybe even aligning, maybe even making a file, as this is what young people at times need to do, just rework on calculations, look at balance sheet numbers, looking at documentation. All this is going to help you when you go up the ladder, when you are in a job, when you become a CFO, you're a controller, you are in your own practice, because those small things which you have done will help you look at the much larger picture. Because when you are looking at a balance sheet, you know that, that is where, so you're looking at a figure, no, that is where the inventory is. So this is where the mess up could have happened, or the depreciation could not have been calculated in that manner, or the financial, the cash flows which you are showing me today, this is something which doesn't seem to be right. So these are some of the things which I feel are very, very important. That training which we go through, it's to do it properly, to look at the subject, your study. Definitely you got to work hard, put in all that, look at the larger picture, how you're going to apply it tomorrow. Even if it is not going to be applied, you can't look at it, but just focus on that moment. So just to summarize that, I don't know, is definitely work hard, focus on your work and see that this is, you don't know how it's going to help in the future. And also keep on following, make it your passion. If you make your profession your passion, then obviously you're going to excel. So I mean, you can excel, you can do a lot of other things, but this is my key takeaway, and this is what I would like to tell people, really.
No, thank you. That's beautiful and very powerful, I must say. I mean, this is one of the best messages I've ever had. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, and most importantly, thank you for sharing your time. I know you're a busy man. Thank you for taking out time for us.
My pleasure, Abhishek. It's my pleasure. You've been so kind, and I just hope this is people find it useful to perhaps listen to. And I know I may not have said anything new, but yes, maybe some different perspective, maybe a different thought process. That's it.
No, it's always knowledgeable to be in your presence. Trust me, it's always nice.
No, you're very kind. Thank you,
Sanjay sir. Nice talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Abhishek. God bless you. Thank you.